You stand at the edge of a feast you were never meant to enjoy. She smiled as she hunted you, eyes gleaming like a predator playing prey. But now that you've surrendered, she sharpens the knife not to kill, but to carve the joy from your bones slowly. You mistake her silence for mystery, but it's just the boredom of a goddess who's lost her god, and you were never one, just the echo of her own seduction. You thought you were chasing her, but she only moved so you would follow. She admired you most when you were dangerous, indifferent, unclaimed. But the moment you bled for her, she buried the blade deeper. She doesn't want your heart, only your hunger. She doesn't love the man who kneels, but the myth that walked past her untouched. Now she forgets your name while sipping from the cup you once held out like salvation. Do you feel it? That bitterness under your ribs, not heartbreak, but humiliation dressed as romance. If this voice is familiar, if you've ever watched love turn to contempt in her eyes, then leave your scent on the altar. Like the video. Carve your wound into the comments. Subscribe, and stay among the cruel truths you were never supposed to name. The moment you kneel, she forgets why she ever looked up. She saw you once not as you are, but as a figure outlined by shadow and motion. You didn't look at her, and that is why she looked at you. You moved as though the world owed you nothing. There was cruelty in your distance, and it lit a hunger inside her that she could neither name nor resist. Not because you were kind, not because you were safe, but because you walked like a man who had buried tenderness and never wept at the grave. And she mistook that for strength. She mistook that for godhood. You never touched her, and that's when she touched herself in your name. Every glance you withheld, every silence you allowed to stretch across her longing, built the cathedral. And she knelt inside it, not to love you, but to feel the thrill of surrendering to something she could not possess. In your absence, she made a myth, a monument, a man carved from nothing but the scent of your disinterest and the arrogance of your stillness. She called it love, but it was worship, and worship is only beautiful until it turns the worshipper into a beggar. Then you turned, slowly, perhaps innocently. Perhaps thinking this was the moment to offer something real. You let her in, you softened, you bled, and in doing so, you shattered the very illusion she built to adore you. The god became a man, and the chase became a cage. The devotion you thought would deepen the bond, it killed it. Not because you did wrong, but because you did what all mortals do, you showed your face. And no idol survives recognition. Now she recoils not from you, but from her own betrayal. She cannot forgive herself for loving a man who dared to love her back. It undoes everything. She must punish you not for hurting her, but for removing her fantasy. The myth had no needs. You, with your trembling heart and trembling hands, are no longer desirable. You are now familiar. And the familiar is never sacred. You thought the offering would be enough, that if you brought her your soul, she would cradle it, but she spits it back into your hands like spoiled wine, because the moment you give it freely, she no longer wants it. The idol demands hunger, not nourishment, desire, not comfort. You gave her the firelight of your certainty, and with that fire, she burned the temple down. She walks past you now with cold indifference, the kind that only comes from someone who once burned. You think she's pretending, that this is a mask. But it isn't. It's apathy, the purest kind born not of hate, but of disappointment. You did nothing wrong. That is your curse. You gave her everything she once dreamed of, and she saw through it. Not because it was fake, but because it was real. And real love is a burden too heavy for those who fell in love with the fantasy of being unloved. You feel her slipping, and you become even gentler, even more devoted. You kneel lower, hold her tighter. But now, every act of affection becomes an act of weakness in her eyes. The more you love her, the more she forgets why she ever needed you. The spell is broken, and now you are just a man. And she does not weep for the death of the love, only for the death of the illusion. She may still lie beside you, smile out of duty, touch you with the hands of memory, but her mind is elsewhere chasing the next shadow, the next indifference, the next figure too distant to bruise her with love. You are no longer the god she feared. You are the man who dared to adore her, and that is the deepest insult of all. Now you wake each morning to a woman who once burned for you, but now only tolerates your warmth. You watch her laugh at the world while forgetting the language of your longing, and you remain, because you believe that if you suffer long enough, she might remember. But gods are never remembered by their suffering, only by their silence. You begin to question everything: your masculinity, your soul, your worth. You think you've become too soft, that maybe the solution is to become cruel again. But even if you regain that indifference, she won't return, because she no longer believes in your myth. And myths, once unmasked, can never be resurrected. You want to ask her what changed, but you already know. What changed is that you loved her, truly. What changed is that she tasted the blood of your sacrifice and found it human. What changed is that you bowed, and gods do not bow, even when they want to. So you carry the ache. You walk beside her like a ghost with your name still on her lips, but not in her heart. She may say she loves you, and perhaps she even means it. But it is not the love she once knew. It is not the love that ignited her. It is the love of duty, of memory, of guilt. The love reserved for a man already buried in her mind. You live now as a relic, a monument to the moment she once fell in love with the idea of you. You cannot unlove her. You cannot resurrect the chase. And so you remain not as a man loved, but as a man remembered. That is the curse of becoming the prize once the hunt is over. You are just another possession gathering dust in her memory, and the bitter truth curls beneath your ribs. You miss not her love, but her pursuit. You miss being the mystery, the distance, the silence that made her weep. And so now, as you sit beside the woman who once chased you through fire, you begin to disappear, not because she hates you, but because you were caught. The idol never loved the worshipper. She loved the altar, the sacrifice, the suffering, the distance between lips that never touched. And now that you kneel, bleeding and bare, she turns her face to the next figure in the dark, the one who won't kneel, and you remain, not unloved, but unimagined. Her desire ends where your certainty begins. She loves your absence more than your presence. She never truly looked at your face, not the lines that held your youth, not the weight behind your eyes, not the breath you held when she smiled. She saw something else, something you didn't know you carried, a flicker, a defiance, a silence so cruel it smelled like danger. You thought it was chemistry, fate, some unspoken connection, but no. It was a mirror, and in it she glimpsed not you, but herself, burning. You didn't give her love. You gave her resistance. You didn't say, "I want you." You said nothing. And that nothing, that perfect, maddening absence, it became her obsession. She didn't fall for your presence. She fell for the echo of herself that danced in your indifference. You were a void where she could place her fantasies. Her reflection glowed brightest when you refused to speak. When you didn't chase her, she ran toward you, not because she needed you, but because you reflected the part of her she couldn't touch: her hunger, her chaos, her desire to be undone without permission. You, unmoved and unreadable, gave her permission to unravel, and that unraveling felt like love. But you mistook the hunger for intimacy. You mistook her passion for connection. You thought the heat in her eyes meant she saw you. She didn't. She only saw the blaze you refused to extinguish. You, in your silence, were a myth, and myths are not loved for their truth. They are loved for the fire they light in the dark. Then you broke the silence. You told her your story. You softened the jaw she admired. You showed your fears, thinking she would lean closer. But fire does not lean toward water. She didn't want your vulnerability. She wanted your flame. She wanted to be near it, to feel its burn, to dance around it, but never to touch the hearth. And when you opened the door and let her in, she found a man. Not a storm, not a danger, not a god, just a man, with hands and breath, a need. She smiled, she nodded, she held you. But something changed. You felt it like a wind shifted, like the moon turned its back. She still said she wanted you, but the way she touched your hand was colder now, like she was remembering something instead of living it. She still answered your texts, but the urgency was gone. She still whispered your name, but it landed on the floor like dust. Why? Because the mirror cracked. Your certainty dissolved. And without that certainty, she had nothing left to reflect. Your doubt made her doubt. Your longing made her hesitate. The very thing you thought would bond you. Your honesty was the very thing that broke the spell. She doesn't love the man who asks. She loves the man who commands, not with words, but with silence. She doesn't want answers. She wants mystery, not solutions, riddles. Because desire is not born from closeness. It is born from distance, from the tension between what is wanted and what is withheld. Now you are close, and she no longer wants. She may not even know why. She'll say, "I'm just tired," or "things feel different," or "it's not you, it's me." But the truth is far more cruel. She no longer burns because you stopped being the flame and became the hand that reached toward hers. You became the one who chases, and no one chases a mirror. You start to question your worth. You look in the glass and don't see what she once saw. You grow restless, needier, but the more you try to reignite her desire, the further she drifts. Because fire only grows in oxygen and your presence smothers her. You begin to lose your own fire. You become polite, careful, overly attentive. She yawns in your presence, not because you've failed, but because you've revealed yourself. And she only ever wanted the version of you that stayed just out of reach. What she loved wasn't you. It was the version of herself that shimmered in your stillness. And now, as you sit across from her, speaking gently, loving fully, she feels trapped, not by your words, but by the fact that you've stopped being the mystery she once longed to solve. You want to scream, you want to say, "I am still the same man," but you're not to her. You are now the man who loves her, and that is the death of her fantasy. It's not personal, it's archetypal. She is drawn to the fire that won't warm her, the presence that won't hold her, the man who disappears before she can catch her breath. Because desire is not about what's given, it's about what's denied. And you, in your fullness, have given too much. You think love is an exchange, but for her, it was always a performance, a dance around the flame. And now the stage is empty, and the curtains have fallen. The music that once made her heart beat now sounds like routine. You want to restart it, to return to the beginning, but she doesn't. She only knows how to chase, and now that you are here, she must turn away. She may look for you in others. She may try to recreate that fire with someone else. and she will for a while, until they, too, step forward, until they, too, offer the warmth instead of the flame. Then she will leave again, chasing herself in the eyes of another unmoved man. And you will be left with the bitter truth that she loved you only when you weren't real, that her passion was a reflection, not a connection, that the moment you stopped being a mystery, she stopped being in love. You try to numb yourself, to become cold again, but it's too late. You've seen the inside of the illusion. You've been loved not for who you are, but for the mask you wore by accident. And now every future intimacy feels like theater, every smile a test, every silence a blade. So you become quiet again, not mysterious, but hollow, not dangerous, but done. You wonder, what was it all for? The answer arrives not in words, but in the way she laughs with someone else. Not louder, not freer, just newer. That's all it takes. A man who hasn't yet broken the mirror. And you sit in the ashes of your own warmth, watching your certainty rot under the weight of her absence. She doesn't hate you, she simply no longer reflects in your eyes, and that, for her, is worse than hatred. It is irrelevance. Worship poisons the altar. Love dies where it is most needed. She wanted to be chosen, not begged for. There was a time when your silence drew her closer than your words ever could. You didn't look at her like the others did. You didn't rush. You didn't smile too easily. You didn't try. And that not trying made her burn. Because beauty wants to be captured, but never chased. It wants to be desired by something colder than itself. You, standing still while others fell over themselves for her, became the impossible. And the impossible is the only thing beauty truly fears and loves. But you ruined it. You fell in love with her. You gave her the crown. You whispered, "You are everything." You told her she was your world, your muse, your reason. You held her like a prayer, thinking she'd find safety in it. But prayers, once answered, lose their urgency. She began to pull away, not because you weren't enough, but because you gave too much. She didn't want your worship. She wanted your absence. She didn't want to be adored. She wanted to be disarmed. The moment you adored her, you killed the distance that kept her spell alive. Worship makes beauty wilt. Devotion makes it run. You thought if you gave her more, she'd stay longer. But each gift, each tender word, was another crack in the altar, until all that remained was the dust of what once made her shine. Now, she looks at you the way a queen looks at a servant with silent pity, not because you've changed, but because you've surrendered. And beauty does not love surrender. Beauty loves resistance. Resistance makes it feel alive, makes it question itself, makes it ache. You stopped being the storm she feared. You became the man who waits. And now, even when she touches you, you feel her drifting. Her eyes no longer dilate in your presence. Her voice softens not with love, but with condescension. You want to scream. But what would you say? I love you too much, I would do anything for you. She's heard it before from men she never kissed, from boys she never wanted. And now you sound just like them, the very thing she thought you'd never become. You say you'd die for her. She wishes you wouldn't, because now she's trapped. Trapped in your tenderness, in your orbit, in your need. And nothing is more suffocating to beauty than need. You see, beauty is not a gift, it's a curse. It must always flee the moment it's caught. You tell yourself she's just busy, that she's overwhelmed, that the passion will return. But you know better. You know it in the way she sighs when you enter the room, in the way she scrolls past your messages. in the way she laughs louder with strangers than she smiles with you. You gave her everything, and now you're empty. Not because she took it, but because she didn't want it. She doesn't want to be everything. She wants to be chased, resisted, forgotten just enough to stay burning. You, in your gentleness, gave her no fire to dance around. You became the man who loves her too well, and beauty hates to be loved too well. It wants to be fought, ignored, feared, because beauty is not goodness. It is danger dressed in softness. It is power, and power never respects those who kneel. And now, in your loyalty, you've become invisible. The man who's always there is the man she no longer sees, the one who waits at the gate, flowers in hand, while she dreams of the stranger who never calls back. You cannot win her with devotion. You cannot hold her with worship, because beauty is not a shrine. It is a flame, and flames do not live in the hands that clutch them. She may still call you when she's lonely. She may still say your name with a trace of the past in her voice, but it's not you she misses. It's the version of you that didn't need her, the one who looked away first, the one who made her question herself. That was the man she loved because he never begged her to stay. And now you're left with the terrible knowledge that love, when given too freely, becomes a burden, that no matter how much you give, it will not resurrect the thrill she once felt for you. In fact, your giving is what buries it. You begin to ask yourself ugly questions. Am I too soft, too kind, too open? And the answer is yes, but not because softness is wrong. It is wrong for her nature, for the nature of beauty itself. Because she was not born to be adored. She was born to be desired, and desire lives in tension, not comfort. You turn the tension into routine, the mystery into schedule, the heat into safety. And now the very things you offered as love have become chains she resents. You imagine leaving, becoming cold again, withholding, but it's too late. She knows you now, knows your voice when it pleads, knows your face when it hopes. You can't go back to being the storm. She's seen your sky without clouds, and it doesn't scare her anymore. You try to become distant again, to reignite what once was. You delay replies, you act disinterested, but it's transparent. She doesn't feel the weight of your indifference anymore, only the fatigue of your performance. So you ask yourself, what did she want? And the answer comes like a knife. Not you. She wanted the feeling you gave her when you didn't care, when you were a mountain and she was the one climbing, when she had to guess, when she had to earn. And now, there is nothing left to earn. You've handed her the summit, and she's already bored of the view. She wanted to be beautiful to someone who didn't need her, someone who wouldn't fold. And now, every time you choose her again, she chooses you a little less. You are not unloved, you are overloved, and in that surplus, her passion dies. She still calls you sweetheart, she still says I love you, but it's thinner now, a habit, not a hunger. You've become the wallpaper in her palace once chosen, now ignored. And each time you try harder, you vanish more. Each gift you offer, each gentle word, only tightens the noose of her indifference. She's not cruel, she's just finished. And you, in your devotion, refuse to see it. You stay, you hope, you believe, but she doesn't punish you with cruelty. She punishes you with kindness, with polite silence, with the warmth reserved for family, not fire. Because beauty, real beauty, does not want to be possessed. It wants to be feared, to be longed for, to be just out of reach. And now that you kneel at her altar, whispering prayers she no longer answers, she walks away. Not because you failed, but because you succeeded in loving her too well. And no altar survives the weight of devotion. A petal falls on a letter never opened. Her name is still carved into the wax. You whisper it once and it echoes back, not as memory, but as absence. Somewhere, she laughs. Somewhere, you no longer burn. The flame doesn't die. It just forgets who lit it.